Hotep, everybody. I would first like to begin this by saying life, prosperity, and health to the great God Amun Ra, to his son Asar, and to his son Heru, master of the world, savior of the world. Hotep. Who is Udjahorresne? For the sake of this video, and for the difficulty of pronouncing his name, I'm just going to refer to the individual that I'll be speaking about as Udjah. So when I speak about Udjah, just know that I'm referring to Udjahorresne. So who is this individual and why am I making this video about him? Well, he was a very important figure in the 26th dynasty of Egypt. The last dynasty before the Persians took over, and he held various titles in his life. He held the title of the commander of the Royal Navy. He was known as the chief physician. He was known as the chief scribe of the great outer hall. He was known as the royal seal bearer, the inspector of the council of scribes, and he was also known as the administrator of the palace. This individual subsequently, because of the documentation that he left, the written works that he left, he is also a historian. He is the primary Egyptian source for the Persian invasion of Kemet and of Egypt under the Persian ruler Cambyses II. Okay. Now, this individual, Udjah, is important for several reasons. He saw several Kemetic rulers and he saw several Persian rulers. So his documentation, his work, his histories encompass a very critical time in Egyptian history. We don't know 100% when Udjah was born. And we don't know 100% when Udjah died, but we do know that he served as the commander of the Royal Navy under two 26th dynasty pharaohs, under two 26th dynasty Nisut. Now, he first served under King Amasis, or King Amos II, who reigned from 570 to 526 BCE. And he also reigned under King Pshmtik III, who reigned from 526 to 525 BCE. It's documented that he only ruled for around 6 months' time. He was actually the king of Egypt when Cambyses II invaded and ended his rule. Udjah lived during the reign of Cambyses II. The short intermediate reign of an individual named Bardia or Shmirdis, who was a possible imposter, claiming to be the brother of Cambyses II, son of Cyrus the Great. And Udjah actually lived during the reign of Darius I, the king of Persia. His historical works, Udjah's historical works, were most likely written during the early reign of Darius I. So, for the sake of this video, I created a approximate timeline for the life of Udjah, and I'm going to assume that he was born sometime during the reign of King Amasis. Probably somewhere around 566 BCE, and I'm going to say that he died sometime during the rule of Darius I. So let's just say around 500 BCE, and we'll give him a lifespan of around 66 years. But we know he lived and died during these different time frames, so we can base a good chronological framework for his birth and death based on the reigns of the different kings he experienced during his lifetime. Okay, we're not 100% sure where Udjah was born. Unfortunately, in his historical accounts and his historical works, he doesn't tell us exactly where he was born. But we do know that he had an affinity with the city Sais. So it's quite possible that he was born in the Kemetic city of Sais. And we have a good historical account of him in this book that I have with various translations of Egyptian documents called Ancient Egyptian Literature by Miriam Litcham. It's a 3-volume work. This is found in volume 3, The Late Period, on page 36. It tells us, he translates the statue inscription of the great historian, chief priest, chief scribe Udjah, in which he documents, his histories. So in the inscriptions left in the historical account by the great Udjah, he says of the coming of Cambyses to Egypt, he says, "The great chief of all lands, Cambyses, came to Egypt, and the foreign peoples of every foreign land were with him. When he had conquered this land in its entirety, they established themselves in it. And he was great ruler of Egypt and great chief of all foreign lands. His Majesty assigned to me the office of chief physician. He made me live at his side as companion and administrator of the palace. I composed his titulary, to wit, his name of King of Upper and Lower Egypt, Mesutiri." Now, what I want you to understand is when he's saying that he composed the titulary of Cambyses II, every ruler of Kemet, what we call a pharaoh, in Kemet, in Egypt, they were known as the Nisu or the Nisubiti. They had at least 5 different names. They had a throne name, a Heru name. They had their regular name. They had at least 5 different names. So when he is saying that he composed the titulary of Cambyses II, when Cambyses II invaded Kemet and conquered Kemet, he took on more than one name in the traditional style of the Kemetic rulers. And so the individual that gave him his name of the King of Upper and Lower Egypt is Udjah. So not only was he an individual living in the area at that time, not only was he an individual who was the commander of the Royal Guard, of the Royal Navy, under 2 particular Nisuts, he was so important and he was so vital and he was so close to the central activities that were going on around this time that when Cambyses II conquered the land of Egypt, it was the chief priest, the chief scribe, the administrator of the palace, the historian, the commander of the Royal Navy, the great Udjah, who composed his titulary and gave him his royal name, his throne name. He's the one that gave him his throne name as the King of Upper and Lower Egypt, the King of Lower and Upper Kemet. He is the one. So he was really, really close. Now, in order to understand why the Persians actually invaded Kemet, unfortunately, Udjah, he doesn't tell us why he believes or why historically the Persians invaded Kemet, and it could have just been a matter of expansions in war. Empires expanded, empires went to war, and Egypt was actually, it was very, very rich. It was very, very rich. It had a lot of grain. It had a lot of gold. It had a lot of information, right? And the doctors there. It had doctors. It had scribes. Egypt was just that place in the ancient world. So there's a number of reasons why Cambyses would have wanted to invade and conquer Kemet. But unfortunately, Udjah, he doesn't give us any insight into why he thinks that it happened or why he knew that it happened. So unfortunately, we will have to go to another source to find out why the Persians, why Cambyses II actually invaded Egypt. Now, you will always have people that say, oh, you can't trust just the historical record as it is written because people lie. Yes, they do. And you always want to have as many archaeological pieces of evidence to verify a claim. So I want to say that first. But what I like to do is I like to look at the historical records. I'm really big on the historical records, and I'll let the other individuals sort out what they feel is the archaeological evidence and what the archaeological record is telling them, etc., etc., etc. I just like to deal with the literary text. I'm very interested in that. So who I'm going to go to is Herodotus, and boy, do they love to slay Herodotus. Some people love him, some people hate him, but Herodotus, he also documents this in an historical light, and he tells us why, from his perspective and from what he heard, why Cambyses actually invaded Egypt. And again, this story may or may not be true. So please don't leave comments. Well, you can leave a comment about whatever you want. I won't say that. So this story may or may not be true, but I want to add it into the video just so we can have some more understanding of what was going on at that time, or what individuals was saying was going on at that time. Herodotus, he basically documents that before Cambyses II took the throne, his father Cyrus, known as Cyrus the Great, was the grand ruler of Persia. And while Cyrus the Great was the ruler of Persia and other lands that the Persian Empire had conquered, he had sent to King Amasis, the same king Amasis that Ujah was actually the commander of the Royal Navy under. He sent to him and asked for the best Egyptian physician who could deal with matters of the eyes. Apparently, either him or someone close to him had a problem with their eyes, and they did not have a doctor suitable enough to deal with this problem in Persia or in the subsequent areas that the Persian Empire had conquered. And they knew that the best doctors were in Egypt, were in Kemet. So they sent to King Amasis requesting that a physician specializing in the treatment of the eyes be sent to him, right? And so Amasis, what he does, he responds by sending a physician. Now, this physician, this Egyptian physician who specialized in the treatment of the eyes, he was upset with King Amasis, and he was disgruntled because he was forced to leave his family behind and go to Persia to work on whatever patient was there waiting on him. So what he eventually did to get back at King of Egypt, King Amasis, what he did was he got in the ear of Cambyses, and he told Cambyses that he should send word to King Amasis telling him that he should give Cambyses his daughter. Right? He should give him his daughter, and he was like, you deserve to have the daughter of the king of Egypt, you know, as one of your concubines or whatever. And Cambyses, thinking that this was a good idea, he asked for the daughter of King Amasis. Now, the Egyptian physician, he was being slick. He knew that one or two things was going to happen. Either King Amasis was going to send his daughter off to live in Persia with Cambyses II, and thus suffer from being stripped away from his family members, just like that Egyptian physician, we do not know his name, just like that Egyptian physician was stripped away from his family, or he was going to refuse and he was going to upset Cambyses, and thus may end up starting a war. So what King Amasis does, according to Herodotus, he gets a woman that is not his daughter, right, dresses her up like his daughter because he didn't want to send his daughter away. And according to Herodotus, he knew that he could not physically win a war with the Persians. So what he did, he got a woman that was like his daughter but not his daughter, dressed her up with fine linen, and sent her to go live with Cambyses. And so after a while, Cambyses II, he kept referring to her as the daughter of Amasis, and finally she told him. listen, you don't really understand how this man has tricked you, okay? I am not his daughter. He tricked you. And so Cambyses, being enraged with this, he decided, I'm going to go to Egypt. I'm going to conquer Egypt, and I'm going to make Amasis pay. All right. So what I'll actually do here as well, since we have a little time, I'm going to actually read this account in the histories of Herodotus. Now, Herodotus is known as the father of history, right? From a Greek perspective. Now, he lived from around 484 to 425 BCE. And if you remember, at the beginning of the video, I told you that the great Udjah, he lived well before this. We're estimating that he lived from around 566 to 500 BCE. So he would have died around 20 years before Herodotus was even born. And again, in the documentation that Udjah left, he left a historical account of Cambyses invading Egypt. So just a sidebar, how can Herodotus be the father of history if we have this guy Udjah leaving a historical document before Herodotus is even born? Just think about that. But with Herodotus, in book number 3 of the histories, he says, it was against it. He gives a lot of information about Amasis. Actually, he probably for the information that we have right now that has been revealed, that has been dug up at archaeological sites, that has been researched, he gives more information about King Amasis of Egypt than any other source at this particular moment. Now, I'm not saying that they won't find more information, more indigenous information with the Egyptian people, but as of now, he gives more information about King Amasis in book 2 of his histories than anyone else. Now, whether this stuff is right or wrong, true or false, that's for another debate. I'm strictly talking about what is in the historical record. So in the beginning of book 3, he has already spoken about King Amasis in book 2. So this is why he starts it thus. It was against this Amasis that Cambyses, son of Cyrus, was preparing to wage war with an army of his other subjects, including Ionian and Aeolian Hellenes. Now, that's probably true. Stop right there. That's probably true because even Udjah claims, he says, the great chief of all foreign lands, Cambyses, came to Egypt, and the foreign peoples of every foreign land were with him. So Udjah had already documented that when Cambyses came to Egypt, he had individuals of other foreign lands with him engaged in this war. So when Herodotus documents that he had the Ionians and the Aeolian Hellenes with him, and the Hellenes is actually Greek. Hellas is another word for Greek. He is saying that he had other people with him, right, when he actually invaded Egypt. So that's just a quick sidebar to show where these historical accounts they are saying the same thing. So that is most likely 100% accurate. Okay. Anyway, he was marching against Egypt because of what happened after he had earlier sent a herald to ask Amasis for his daughter. He had made this request on the advice of an Egyptian doctor who resented Amasis for having chosen him out of all the physicians in Egypt to be delivered to Persia, and thus tearing him away from his wife and children. And this had occurred because Cyrus had sent a request to Amasis for the best physician in Egypt who specialized in the treatment of the eyes. It was because of this grievance that the Egyptian advised Cambyses to ask Amasis for his daughter. He hoped thereby that Amasis would either suffer anguish if he gave her to him, or become the enemy of Cambyses if he did not. Amasis, disturbed and apprehensive about the power of the Persians, could not refuse Cambyses, but neither could he bring himself to give up his daughter, since he knew well that Cambyses intended to take her not as a wife, but as a concubine. After carefully considering all these matters, he decided on the following course of action. The daughter of Apries, the former king, was very tall and attractive, and the only surviving daughter of that family. Her name was Netitis. Amasis dressed her up in fine clothing and gold, and then sent her off to Persia on the pretense that she was his own daughter. After a while, when Cambyses kept greeting the girl by her patronymic as the daughter of Amasis, she said to him, "Sire, you have no idea how you have been duped by Amasis. He decked me out in finery and sent me off to you on the pretense that he was giving up his own daughter, when in reality I am the daughter of Apries, his former master, whom he murdered when the Egyptians revolted." And so, according to the Persians, it was this little speech that caused Cambyses, son of Cyrus, to become extremely enraged with Egypt. Okay, but we know from both accounts, both from Ujah and Herodotus, that by the time Cambyses actually made it to Egypt to invade the land, Amasis was no longer alive. Okay, Amasis died in 526 BCE, and his successor, King Pishmetic III, took over in 526 BCE. And Cambyses II made it to Egypt in 525 BCE. So he was a little too late. Okay, a little too late. So we know from Ujah what happened when Cambyses made it to Kemet. He desecrated several cities. He murdered a lot of Egyptians, and one of the things that actually happened was he desecrated the city of Sais, whose patron deity was the goddess Neith. Now, Sais and Neith was sacred to Ujah. So since he ended up being close to the king, Cambyses, remember I told you he's the one that actually gave Cambyses his Kemetic name, right? His throne name. Since he was so close to him, he was able to convince him to stop the slaughter in the city of Sais and actually restore the temple and restore the goddess Neith to her position. So what we're going to do at this point, we're going to refer back to the historical documentation left by Ujah and see how he describes the invasion of Cambyses. Okay, the invasion of Cambyses II and his actual role in that. Okay, so he says, "I let his majesty know the greatness of Sais, that it is the seat of Neith the Great, the mother who bore Re, and inaugurated birth when birth had not yet been, and the nature of the greatness of the temple of Neith, that it is in heaven in its every aspect, and the nature of the greatness of the castles of Neith, and of all the gods and goddesses who are there, and the nature of the greatness of the palace, that it is the seat of the sovereign, the Lord of heaven, and the nature of the greatness of the Resenet and Mehenet sanctuaries, and of the house of Re, and the house of Atum, the mystery of all the gods, the one honored by his city guard, and all the gods, the prince count, royal seal bearer, sole companion, true beloved king's friend, the chief physician, Ujah, born of Artemides." He says, "I made petition to the majesty of the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Cambyses, about all the foreigners who dwelled in the temple of Neith, in order to have them expelled from it, so as to let the temple of Neith be in all its splendor as it had been before. His majesty commanded to expel all the foreigners who dwelled in the temple of Neith, to demolish all their houses and all their unclean things that were in this temple. When they had carried all their personal belongings outside the wall of the temple, his majesty commanded to cleanse the temple of Neith and to return all its personnel to it." The something is lost there. "And the hour priest of the temple. His majesty commanded to give divine offerings to Neith the Great, the mother of God, and to the great gods of Sais as it had been before. His majesty commanded to perform all their festivals and all their processions as had been done before. His majesty did this because I had let his majesty know the greatness of Sais, that it is the city of all the gods who dwell there on their seats forever." So basically what Udjah the Great is letting us know is that when Cambyses came into the land of Egypt, of course he's coming in an act of war. So among other cities that he attacked the city of Sais, where Udjah is presumably from. He desecrated the temple of Neith, desecrated the god, and him and a lot of foreigners that were in him invaded the city, invaded the temple, and despoiled it, basically. And so Udjah, finding his new position with Cambyses for a reason we'll later look into, he petitioned the king and explained to him the importance of the city of Sais, the importance of the goddess Neith, and the importance of all of the rituals that were taking place in that holy site. And because of his petition, Cambyses removed all the foreigners out of the temple and out of the city, and he was able to restore that place, right? So just think of all the countless lives that he saved, okay? Think of all the countless lives that he saved by convincing Cambyses to ease up on the punishment of individuals in the city of Sais. And just think of how pleased the goddess Neith would have been when he had her temple restored. Okay, now it is my belief that it was for the simple fact that he was also known as the chief physician and the chief scribe. Being that position of the chief physician, I think that's what gave him a special place with Cambyses. Okay, because he said earlier that His Majesty assigned to me the office of chief physician. He made me to live at his side as companion and administrator of the palace. Now, we see here that Udjah is telling us about the high status that an Egyptian physician could have with a king of Persia, Cambyses, which rings true in both stories, because you remember Herodotus said that Cyrus, Cambyses the second father, had sent to Egypt for a physician and had that physician come back to live in Persia and treat someone with the problem with the eyes. So you see that someone who was a very, very good physician could be seen as, I don't want to just say someone who could perform magic, but to be a healer. Especially back in those days, raised someone to an elevated status. So I believe he was able to get Cambyses to bend to his will, so to speak, because he was so great of a physician. He could do things and he could heal in ways that the average individual couldn't. And we see from the story of Herodotus how Cambyses' father Cyrus sent to Egypt for a physician. We see already that it was known in the ancient world that the best physicians came from Egypt. So Udjah had to have been a better physician than any of the physicians that were already in the camp of the Persians. Now, by this time, that maybe that other physician was still back in Persia, maybe he had died, or who knows where he is at this particular point in time. But it seems that Udjah, since he gave this individual his name, his throne name, he was gave the title of chief physician and made to live at his side as his companion. It would appear that Udjah took this position that other physician would have had for Cyrus. So I think it was his abilities as a physician that gave him the ability to negotiate on behalf of the city of Sais and on behalf of the temple of Neith. Now, so we have the historical record of the great Udjah telling us about Cambyses' invasion of Kemet, his invasion of Kemet with other foreigners, and we also see him specifically talking about what happened in the city of Sais. Okay, we see him talking about what happened in the city of Sais. So we're going to jump back into Herodotus book 3, and we're going to pick out a few pieces of information that line up with what Udjah was saying, to kind of, 2 or 3 witnesses to kind of verify this historical record. So we know from Udjah that Cambyses made it to Egypt under the successor of King Amasis, right? And Herodotus, he also documents this. Now, I don't know if maybe he got this information from reading Udjah's work, who knows? But he also documents that when Cambyses made it to Kemet, he did not find Amasis alive. He found his successor and he took the rulership from him. Okay, so Herodotus documents in Book 3. For Cambyses did not manage to find Amasis alive when he marched to Egypt, as Amasis had already died after having reigned 44 years, in all of which time nothing very unusual had happened. When he died, he was embalmed and buried in the tomb complex which he himself had built at the sanctuary. But while Pusmenitos, son of Amasis, reigned, who in Udjah's work you see him called King Pushmetik III. Some of these names are difficult to pronounce. I apologize. Son of Amasis' reign, the greatest portent of all occurred in Egypt. Thebes received rain, which had never happened, neither before this nor afterward up to my time, according to the Thebans. It simply does not rain in Upper Egypt at all. But at that time, a light sprinkle of rain did fall on Thebes. So we see in both historical accounts, okay, that Cambyses made up his mind to come to Egypt during the reign of King Amasis, right? But by the time he made it, King Amasis had already died. That's why his successor only was able to rule for less than a year, because the invasion was already on the way. And so his successor, King Pushmetek, or that name that Herodotus calls him, he was only able to rule for around 6 months before he was overthrown by the Persians. And what's interesting is Herodotus actually documents Cambyses' invasion of the city of Sais as well, the presumable hometown of Udjah, further verifying the historical record on both accounts. Herodotus in Book 3 says, in reference to the invasion of the city of Sais, from Memphis, Cambyses came to the city of Sais, and there he accomplished exactly what he had hoped to do. As soon as he entered the home of Amasis, he ordered that the corpse of Amasis be removed from his tomb. When this had been done, he ordered that the corpse be whipped, plucked of its hair, stabbed, and subjected to every other kind of outrage as well. His men eventually became very weary as they continued to perform these commands, because the corpse, having been embalmed, withstood his treatment and would not fall apart. And so he goes on to talk about the atrocities that Cambyses had his men perform on the mummified remains of King Amasis. But we see in the beginning of that paragraph in book number 3, from Memphis, Cambyses came to the city of Sais, and there he accomplished exactly what he had hoped to do. He ran amok. Okay, he ran amok, and he was basically stopped by the great physician Udjah. Okay, and so according to the historical record as left by Udjah, he further tells us things that he did. Now he doesn't explain why he was taken from Kemet to Persia, but we do know that at some point during his life, I'm not sure if it was during the reign of Cambyses or after, or the exact timeline, because he isn't clear. But we do know from the historical record left behind by Udjah that at some point he himself was taken away to Persia, and he returned from Persia back to Kemet under the reign of Darius I. And the fact that him being this chief physician carried off to Persia, it leads further credence to some kernel of truth in the story that we found in Herodotus of Cyrus asking for a physician of Egypt to be taken back to Persia. And this Egyptian physician, upset with King Amasis for sending him away from his family, doing the underhanded things that led to Cambyses invading Kemet in the first place. There may be some truth to that, because elements of that story are found in the historical record as left by Udjah. So you have a Kemetic source that is talking about things that are right in line with Herodotus, who's saying he got this stuff from some of the Persians. Okay, we see that in reference to Darius the First, Udjah says, the prince, count, royal seal bearer, sole companion, prophet of those by whom one lives, the chief physician, Udjah, born of Atamirtis, he says, the majesty of the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Darius, ever living, commanded me to return to Egypt when his majesty was in Elam and was great chief of all foreign lands and great ruler of Egypt, in order to restore the establishment of the house of life after it had decayed. The foreigners carried me from country to country. They delivered me to Egypt as commanded by the Lord of the two lands. I did as his majesty had commanded me. I furnished them with all their staffs, consisting of the well-born, no low-born among them. I placed them in the charge of every learned man in order to teach them all their crafts. His majesty had commanded to give them every good thing in order that they might carry out all their crafts. I supplied them with everything useful to them, with all their equipment that was on record as they had been before. His majesty did this because he knew the work of this guild in making live all that are sick, in making endure forever the names of all the gods, their temples, their offerings, and the conduct of their festivals. I want to read that last part one more time. His majesty did this because he knew the worth of this guild in making live all that are sick, and making endure forever the names of all their gods, their temples, their offerings, and the conduct of their festivals. So he's telling us blatantly that Darius allowed him to go back and restore the house of life because he saw the worth of the group of individuals who Udjah was the chief of, the leader of, in making live all that are sick, which ties back into my assumption that Udjah was so important to Cambyses because he was a physician. Being able to heal the sick gave you a special status. Okay, so we see that after Cambyses died, okay, there was this guy named Shmirdis. All right, he's also known by another name in the historical record, but for now we'll just call him Shmirdis. Shmirdis was actually the brother of Cambyses and a son of Cyrus. But here's the kicker. The real Shmirdis was most likely dead, and it was a magician, a fake guy, a shyster, pretending to be Shmirdis, who for a brief moment seized the Persian throne after Cambyses II had died by saying that he was the real Shmirdis. Now, it's still up in the air. Scholars are still debating on whether he was the real Shmirdis or the fake Shmirdis. You know, maybe the world may never know. But what ended up happening is Darius was made to believe that he was the fake Shmirdis, and he basically took the throne from that individual. So Shmirdis, he didn't rule too long, and then Darius eventually took over. So sometime between Udjah restoring the city of Sais and restoring Neith and becoming the sole companion and chief physician of Cambyses II, somewhere between that and Darius the First taking over, Udjah goes off to Persia. While in Persia, he most likely was training other individuals in his craft. He probably taught other individuals how to do what he did. He probably made doctors, showed them how to create surgical instruments, showed them how to create the tools needed to be a physician, taught them about how to diagnose disease, what to do about certain diseases, you know, how to document these things, how to keep records, and he probably trained. That's probably why he was taken from Kemet all the way back to Persia. It's like right now, people from foreign countries, they may come to America, learn what we have to learn, and take that knowledge back home and use that knowledge to teach and empower their own people. So what we see in the ancient world, what they probably did, because Udjah was so powerful in his craft as a physician, he was probably taken to Egypt to create a physician guild, the guild of healers, right back there in Persia. And when he received word that the house of life was in decay, and also because he probably wanted to die and be buried in his own homeland, he petitioned King Darius, and he requested to be sent back home to restore the house of life. Now, the house of life, I would assume, I don't know, I have to look into this a little deeper, so take this with a grain of salt. I would have to assume the house of life, it most likely contained medical texts, medical papyri, documented diseases, how to diagnose diseases, and everything needed, like how we understand journals of medicine today. That's what it probably had. It probably contained scrolls telling you what plants and what herbs that you need to use to treat certain ailments. If an individual was showing certain symptoms, they probably had this disease. In order to find out what was wrong with somebody, how to treat the blood, how to treat the brain, how to treat the eyes, how to treat the hands. All of this information was probably stored inside of this house of life. That may be why it was known as the house of life. Okay, because you know, the house of life, to restore from sickness, to restore from the point of death someone back to life, is what doctors do. It's what physicians do. So Darius, probably seeing the worth of this guild in making well all that was sick, as Udjah said, he probably told him, look, I'm gonna allow you to go back to Kemet. You have done enough here. You have, you know, you've taught my people well. You composed these. He was also the chief scribe. He was also literate. He could also write. So Udjah probably wrote multiple scrolls and gave them all of the information that they needed to start their own hospitals and schools of physicians and healing. And so we know that Udjah went back to his hometown of Kemet to restore the house of life, and that's where he eventually died. And he wrote the historical account that we have right now to today. So when we ask the question, who is Udjah, right? Who is Udjah? A lot of times we seem to only view snapshots of history that individuals take the time to dig up and present. Okay, and I know a lot of my viewers have probably never heard this guy's name, never heard this guy's story, so he would be lost to history. But he was a historian, he was a physician, he was an army man, right? He was a scribe. Okay, I wouldn't say that he don't necessarily call himself a priest, but he did a lot to restore the temple of the gods and to bring back the respect to the gods. He was a savior of his people. Okay, he was a savior of his people. He was a restorer of the land. Okay, he was a healer. And like I already said, but he was a historian. And he lived through King Amasis of Kemet, King Prishpatik III of Kemet, King Cambyses, the Persian ruler who ruled Kemet, Smyrnus, for that brief moment, the Persian ruler who quasi had rulership over Kemet by having rulership over the Persian Empire, and through some of the reign of Darius the First. Okay? And it's quite possible that some of the information that Herodotus used in his histories about this time period, it's quite possible that he got some of this historical information from Udjah indirectly, because Herodotus claims that some of the information that he got from Persians. Now, if Udjah lived in Persia for a particular point of time, right, as the grand physician, the chief physician, he would have left behind information that could have several decades later came into the hands of Herodotus, which made it into Herodotus' book, The Histories. So we may actually see that the information that that Herodotus has on King Amasis, could have actually came from this guy Udjah. I want you to think about that. Because see, Herodotus, he was a compiler. He was a compiler of history. You know, he interviewed a lot of people. He asked a lot of questions, and he wrote down the stories that he heard. And so sometimes we have to ask ourselves, I wonder where he got this from. Right? I wonder where he got this from. Well, it's quite possible that he got some of this from the great Udjah. Who is Udjahorresne? He was a great, great man, and may we continue to say his name so that he'll live forever. Life, prosperity, and health to the great God Amun-Ra. Life, prosperity, and health to his son Asar. And life, prosperity, and health to his son Heru, the perfected man, the savior of all humanity, my higher self, Hotel.